Thank you for joining us. I'm Dana Calloway with HMS Communications, that's Hanford Mission Integration Solutions, and we thank you for joining tonight's hybrid public meeting. For those of you here in the room, the exits are there and right out through this door, out this door here, and we thank you for those who are joining us remotely. This meeting is being recorded and we'll post it to the Hanford.gov events calendar as soon as we possibly can. Tonight's meeting is going to be about talking about the melter heat up and the necessary regulations and permits. We have from the Department of Energy, Matt Irwin, and from the Washington State Department of Ecology, Suzanne Dahl. And we will begin tonight's meeting presentation with Matt Irwin.
All right, good evening and thanks for joining us here today. As was pointed out, my name is Matt Irwin. I'm the Assistant Manager for the Waste Treatment and Mobilization Plant for the Department of Energy. And what we're here to talk about today is the Direct Feed Low Activity Waste Program. We can put the slides up. Good to go.
Give me 1 second. Okay.
Okay, close down. Computers are moving a little slowly tonight compared to other nights, so we apologize about that. We'll get right to it as soon as we can.
Go ahead, Matt.
Okay, so our second slide just shares the overall agenda. We've got 4 different topics we'll cover, and then we'll open up for questions and answers. We can go to slide 3. I'll talk a little bit about the program. The DFLAW program integrates multiple facilities to retrieve, treat, and immobilize low-activity waste from the tanks. It starts in tank farms where we have pre-treated low-activity waste staged in one of our double shell tanks. That material is fed to the low-activity waste facility. Glass formers are added. The mixture of glass formers and waste are then added to the melter, which is a melt pool at 2100 degrees. Then it's all mixed using bubblers and air and then poured into containers. Each of those containers then is allowed to cool, and that waste is then put on a truck in an overpack and sent over to the integrated disposal facility. While we're making that glass, we also have an off-gas system that takes the impurities that come off of the glass. Take those impurities. We have a multi-train off-gas system that will scrub those impurities, remove them from the off-gas so that out the stack we're actually putting out clean air that's also sampled. That secondary cooling, because the components downstream of the melter don't like 2100 degrees, that secondary cooling water is provided to our effluent management facility. There it is treated with an evaporator, and the condensate goes down to our effluent treatment facility, and any of the things that are at the bottom get fed back into the glass. And then, as I mentioned, at the end of the day, those filled glass containers are provided to the integrated disposal facility, and that's where they are stored. So if we can go to the next slide, we're going to show this in a little bit of a pictorial view. If we start in the center of the page, that is the AP tank farm. From the tank farm, specifically AP 106, the tank waste is treated. Law tank waste is fed from AP 106 down the yellow line and over to the law facility, which is in the green in the lower left-hand corner. The law facility is where the process I just described occurs. The white line that comes out of the law facility actually goes to effluent management facility. That represents our secondary waste. That secondary waste is passed through an evaporator, and the condensate is then sent down to the effluent treatment facility and the liquid effluent retention facility and the effluent treatment facility, which is on the far right of the picture. Then those vitrified containers are put on the back of a truck in an overpack and sent to the integrated disposal facility up in the upper left-hand corner in purple. So that just gives a pictorial view of an overhead of the facilities and the various interactions that have to occur to support the overall DFLAW program to vitrify the tank waste. If we go to the next slide is just showing an overhead of the entire Hanford site. The waste treatment and mobilization plant is pretty much in the center of that graphic. and it's what we call the Central Plateau. So that's where our processing facilities were originally located and where the waste treatment plant is today. All right, we'll switch to the next slide. This just gives a close-up overhead of the waste treatment and mobilization plant. The facilities we're talking about today are on the right side. The low-activity waste is in the bottom right-hand corner. The analytical lab also supports DF Law. That's where our process samples are evaluated to make sure that we're getting the right mixture of glass formers and tank waste that we then feed to the melter. And then in the upper right-hand corner is the effluent management facility. That's where our secondary liquid wastes are processed from Law. All right, we can switch to the next slide. Our regulatory framework. So this is from a big picture standpoint. The overall WTP facility is governed by the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act and are part of our dangerous waste permit, which is why we're here talking today. Washington State Department of Ecology has issued that permit, and they govern our overall permit and work with the Department of Energy and make sure that we meet all the requirements and that we're managing our waste properly. We work together on this modification. This specific modification is to address, it was originally written with the concept of running both melters at the same time. Both of the melters would be pushed to their operating capacities and run them simultaneously. What we found though is to bring a melter up, you first have to add water to condition the top so that the top of the melt pool is a little bit cooler when that waste is added to or that feed is added to the top of the melt pool. And then you start to add the feed. That creates a cold cap. It's the impurities that form a little bit of a layer on the very top of the melter. And then you get into a steady state where you're feeding, your pressures are all stable, your temperatures are all stable, and there's bubblers that keep that mixing. We've shown a lot of proficiency at running the melters by themselves. When we try to run both of them though, you have to bring one melter up, then you have to condition, that takes a couple of hours, feed the second melter, then run both melters at the same time. That challenges not so much the melters, but challenges the downstream components. Those are the exhaust fans, the off-gas train, and all of the various treatment technologies. Those systems worked fine, but all it would take is a small either pressure blip, airflow blip, instrument blip. And when we would trip out of feeding one or both of the melters, and getting them back up would take a long period of hours. And if that happens while we're spiking, which is what the environmental performance demonstration test is intended to do, it's to provide a maximum load of contaminants through the system and prove that those are all being removed by the off-gas train. And trying to do that with both melters, and while we're spiking, and if we would trip off, it would take us a period of hours to get back into that configuration. And that was challenging some of our other downstream components. So the dialogue we had was to be able to change the permit to test each melter individually here in the short term. We knew that we could operate stably and that all the fans and all the pumps and everything else work very well in the single melter configuration. We know that it can be operated dual melter because we've done it multiple times, but trying to run it in a stable fashion with the conservative set points that we have set up at our current proficiency level, we found that was particularly challenging at this stage, but especially when we're trying to push them to their maximum limits. And what I mean by limits is our maximum feed rate capacity in parallel with the spiking. So that's at a high level what we were trying to do here on this permitting action. If we go to the next slide, it talks a little bit more about that, and just talks about our stepped approach, which is to test each melter individually, run them for a period of time, and then work our way up to running both melters in a dual melter configuration, and then push them to their capacity. When we can do that in a systematic, measured approach. So that kind of, then I guess the other part is that I did want to highlight is that this modification also institutionalized the amended consent decree that changed our date from August to October. It took into consideration a number of factors, but this also captures that October 15th Commissioning consent decree amendment that was put on the consent decree. So that gives a high level summary. And at this point, I'll hand off to Suzanne and she'll talk about the specific details from a permit perspective.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Dahl from the Washington State Department of Ecology. Thanks, Matt. And I thought I'd just talk through a little bit of the details. And I wanted to go back for just a second and just emphasize a few things. It's sometimes difficult when you get a permit modification to figure out what's changed and why did it change. And so the thing that's being changed here is originally we were going to test both melters. And when I say test, it's called the environmental performance demonstration test. It's an emission testing. So the whole point of that is if you are heating waste in the future up to a certain amount, and you then are sending that the off gas from that waste through off gas systems, the regulations require that you go through a testing process before you ever let the facility operate in its full configuration. And in doing that, when you're doing the testing, you spike with certain constituents, certain hazardous constituents. And so you spike with some organics, and you spike with metals, and you spike with dioxins and furans. And so the whole point is, you know how much you spiked into the melter, and then the melter does a certain amount of degrading those materials or incorporating them into glass. And then the off gas, the really complex off gas system that Matt was talking about, then does a finishing job of taking out of those chemicals. And the important part of that is that so that what goes out the stack is underneath certain limits. It's underneath the regulatory limits, and you've destroyed organics to a certain extent. The requirement is that they destroy organics to meet 99.99%. So that's a pretty, that's pretty much a high destruction of organics. And so that's why you do an environmental performance test, is ahead of time, before you're allowing the facility to go, you're testing the system, the melters and all the off-gas systems, to make sure that when you run the facility, you're running it in a way that's protective of in this case, the air, but it's protective of human health and the environment. And so what is different, what got changed and why we're here having this conversation, originally we were going to test both melters at once. And as Matt really well described, the difficulties of doing that. So we made the decision to say, okay, let's test the first melter and let's set its operating parameters. And then those parameters get set into a permit. And that's how they have to, if you successfully run that first melter with a certain throughput of waste and a certain temperature on this off-gas system and another temperature on this other off-gas system, and you successfully prove that when you run it like that, you're protective of human health and the environment, then those are the parameters that you give to that melter. And then we would test the second melter and go through that same thing, find out what those parameters are that are best to run the facility at. And I mentioned that we spike the material into the melter, but then at the stack, you're sampling, and you're sampling for all those different things that you spiked with. And so it's about 10 different sampling trains that are at the stack on top of the facility after the whole off-gas system. And that all that laboratory all that material goes off to a laboratory to be analyzed. And so that you can see exactly what was in the off gas while you were running this sort of giant scientific test. And in doing that, you say, okay, those are the parameters that are safe to run the facility at. So we did it with the first melter and established the operating parameters for the first melter. And then we'll do it with the second melter and establish those operating parameters. And then later down the road, we'll do it with both melters running together. And so in the permit, you'll have parameters that are specific to each melter, and you'll have parameters that are specific to running it together. And in the end, it probably was better that we chose to do it this way, because sometimes in the future, there will be just one melter running and then the other melter running. And then there'll be the situations where both melters are running. So we'll actually have more fine-tuned operating parameters on the facility by doing it this way. So we had to go through and change various permit conditions that were already written that outlined how this testing was done. And so we had to go through and allow for now a single testing and then another single testing and dual testing. So there was a series of permit conditions we had to modify to do that. And then there were also a series of tables that we had to modify in the permit to show those operating parameters for the single melter 1 and for the single melter 2 and for the both melters run together. And it's listed as a dual melters. And so those tables got changed so that you could input in those specific parameters. And then, as Matt mentioned, that we also cut the permit up to match the consent decree commissioning date of October 15th for both the law facility and the effluent management facility. And then, pardon? Okay, thank you. And so then we also had to change the demonstration test plan that's in the permit to allow for all of those details. And in the meantime, when the Department of Energy submitted this Class 2 permit modification request to us, which we worked together on, they also requested a temporary authorization to be able to proceed forward with the work. And so we granted, Department of Ecology granted that temporary authorization to allow them to keep going on the testing while we were going through the process of finalizing the permit.
All right, so I think we're at the point we can hand it back for logistics and then questions.
Yes, we have, if we can go to the next slide, please. Our comment period is open through November 1st. You can send it to us electronically. That's preferred, but we'll take the comments any way you'd like to send them. You're very welcome to type them up and mail them if you'd like. Please send them to Dana McFadden with the Washington State Department of Ecology, 3100 Port of Benton Boulevard in Richland, Washington, 99354. Thank you both, Matt and Suzanne, for your excellent explanation. And that brings us to questions. We'll take questions in the room. If you're online, Colleen Drinkard is monitoring the questions. Just drop them in the chat and she can read them off to us. And if you're joining us phone only, hit *6 to unmute and then to go back on mute. Once again, hit *6. We ask that everyone stay on mute until we've had the opportunity for everyone to ask the question. Thank you very much. And is there a question in the room? Not seeing one. Colleen, is there a question in the chat?
Yeah, we have our first question. Just Liz wondering how many people are in the room.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
So what did you count before the meeting? We have
I think we have 13 people in the room.
about 13.
And anyone here who isn't staff, or anyone here is from the public? I believe everyone in attendance in the room is staff. And online we have 16 people. And then any questions from anybody who is on the phone? Press *6 to unmute and go ahead and just ask your question. I'm not sure if we have anybody who's joining us phone only, so we will go ahead and go back to the chat. It looks like we have one there, Colleen.
Yeah, the question we have is from Mia Burke. Can you share an update on how the EPDT process is going currently? Have you tested both melters separately yet? When do you expect to test both of the melters at the same time?
So,
Right, I do the first part, you do the second.
okay, we did.
Okay. So, both melters have been tested. And we've gotten the lab results back from melter 1 and actually processed the permit bond that sets those operating parameters for melter 1. The testing for melter 2 was concluded on Saturday, and so those laboratory samples will be sent out, well, they're being sent to the lab right now. And then I'll let you answer the last part.
Yeah, sure. So, now that those are both done, we'll be, getting to the point where we can start hot commissioning, achieve the consent decree, and then nominally, we look somewhere in the 6-month time frame that we would start to do some dual melter ops, demonstrate some proficiency, and then do the test, once we've, shown that we can do that in a stable format. So, nominally 6 months from, I would say, the end of this month-ish.
Thank you.
And there's a permit condition that we put in on this permit bond that is out for public comment right now that says that the dual melter test has to be initiated within 6 months of completing melter 2 and within 240 gallons, 240,000 gallons of treatment.
Any other questions in the chat?
I don't have any, actually, we just had one that came through. Yes, this is from Mark. Will melter 1 that passed the EPDT run, will melter 1 that passed the EPDT run the VIT process with live tank waste while the dual melter EPDT is ongoing?
So, melter 1 is what we will start with, once we get back the test results from the lab and develop that preliminary report. Then we'll be in the position to do melter 2, and then we would continue to be treating tank waste as we, utilize the hours that are part of the permit to do the dual melter testing. So we will likely cycle between 1 and 2 during the 6-month time frame to get both of the melters running in a stable, cycling format, and then we'll bring them both up together and run that for a period of time and then do the test. You have anything to answer that?
When we issued last week the operating parameters limits for melter 1, along with that, there was a request letter from the department, as required in the permit, from the Department of Energy to be able to start treating tank waste. And we granted that. For melter 1 only, they won't be able to put tank waste through melter 2 until we complete the operating parameter limits permit modification for the second melter.
And are there other questions in the room? I'm expecting questions from folks in the room any further. I believe we will just revert to chat now for the remainder of the meeting. Thank you all.
Okay, the next question is from Liz Matson. Can you give an update on hot commissioning and the October 15th start date?
So we're right on the cusp. All authorizations have been provided. We have a few startup actions to validate and confirm from both a physical and a paper standpoint. Then we will be gearing up later this week to perform the first transfer from tank farms to the low activity waste facility, and then commissioning is imminent.
Waited a long time for that. Very exciting time. And let's check the phones one more time. If there's someone joining us via the phone only, press *6 to unmute. I'm not hearing any. I guess we don't have anyone joining us by phone. I didn't see that in the chat. So.
Liz had kind of a follow-up. She says, will there be a live feed? It's a big day.
I'm assuming we're not talking about a lunch feed, but no, we don't have any provisions for a live feed at this time, unless you happen to actually be out on site, and then you'll be able to hear the cheering. So if you're close enough, that's the best I can offer.
Not seeing any questions in the room, knowing there's no one on the call that I'm aware of. Are there any more questions for the chat? Please feel free to ask a question, and if not, we will conclude.
Mhm. So just one point, Mark asks to clarify. Once melter one runs hot, will it treat waste the entire time the other EPDTs are in progress?
So the melter two testing, the environmental performance demonstration test portion is already complete, so it's now idle. And we'll be doing some maintenance on it, while the test results come back from the analytical lab over the next couple of weeks, and then we'll prepare the preliminary report. So that testing is already complete. Melter one will, then receive radioactive feed and operate. We'll only operate it for nominally a week, maybe a little bit longer, to achieve the consent decree. Then we'll transfer all our secondary waste to the effluent treatment facility for the first time. That'll be another first. And then we'll bring melter one back up and start operating it in a rhythm. And melter two will follow as soon as it gets its authorization. So ultimately, any future EPDT testing will be done while both melters are operating with rad feed.
Mhm. All right, and then Liz just had another quick question. Can you remind us how the first batch of hot waste will be arriving at the law facility?
So over in Tank Farms and AP 106, we have staged over 800,000 gallons of pre-treated low-activity waste. That material will be pumped in underground pipe systems from the tank farms down to the low-activity waste facility. On the slides, it's the overhead shot. It's an orange line, or might be goldenrod if you want to go that route. There we go. That's at least up on our screen in here. And so it's pumped in an underground pipe. I see we're getting us set up here. Yep, that one. So that goldenrod line that starts at AP 106 in the center of the picture, and then it goes to the east, which is down. I know that's not normal on a diagram. And then it turns south at the effluent management facility. The reason that's significant, I'll give you a little extra trivia. That 90-degree turn is the low point, and that low point is specifically designed so that if we ever lose pumping capability, it all collects in a known location. And then we're able to distribute it either back to the low activity waste facility or back to the tank farms if we have to. So that's what it is. It's an underground pipe.
All right, and then it looks like there is a follow-up question from Liz. Does the waste start getting pumped through the pipe on the 15th or earlier? Will that be the first use of the pipe system? And how did that system get tested?
So that system has received water piped through it. In the past, it's also had hydro testing to make sure that it's leak tight. We have not made waste transfer, so it will be the first waste transfer on that particular pipe. That waste transfer will occur in advance of both the consent decree and obviously feeding the melter. So that is, as I stated in my earlier statement, that is imminent and will be happening at some point here this week once all of our steps are confirmed.
Very exciting.
We have another question from Mark. He said, not fully related, but are there ongoing plans to safely ship secondary debris law for off-site treatment?
So WTP has no plans to do anything else other than vitrified glass. So from a waste treatment and mobilization plant, that's where we are.
So the glass will go for disposal and it has to cool adequately, and then it will go for disposal to the integrated disposal facility, which is a landfill on site.
Yeah, good. So good points with that. So that's in the graphic that we have up. That's in the upper left-hand corner is the integrated disposal facility. And that's where the cooled glass containers will be shipped in an overpack.
And then other waste, we call it secondary waste because it's not the primary waste of glass. some of that is the liquid that is in the white line on that same graphic that goes, over to and gets evaporated at the effluent management facility, and the bottoms of that go back to the melter, the tops of that go to the liquid effluent retention facility, which converts it into a brine, and then it's sent off-site for grouting, and then it comes back on site and goes to the integrated disposal facility landfill. Not immediately, but there will eventually be solid secondary waste that will come out of the waste treatment plant, HEPA filters that get used, other media that gets used, and that will also get appropriately treated and sent to the integrated disposal facility.
Good points, Suzanne. That's a much more complete answer, and that's also the resting place for melters when they reach the end of their design life. They will be solidified, and then they are moved out on rails outside the facility, and then moved over also to the integrated disposal facility. So I think that's a complete answer.
I always appreciate and respect the knowledge of our presenter. Hanford is a complicated place, and this is very helpful to those of us who are trying to learn and understand. All right, I think we are probably close to being able to conclude unless there are other questions. I'm not seeing other questions. Excellent. Liz says, thank you for your wonderful answers, and I echo that sentiment. Thank you all. Thank you for everyone who came in person. Thank you for those who joined us online. We will be dropping a survey in the chat. We'd love to improve our meetings if you have ideas for us. And of course, there is a survey QR code here in the room. For all of us here at the Richland Public Library, we thank you and wish you a wonderful evening. Good night.